I'm Sarah. I'm an ex-Amish girl from Pennsylvania, and today I'm going to talk about something that makes people extremely curious, but also uncomfortable. Why do Amish marriages stay together at such incredible rates? The statistic you hear thrown around is that over 96% of Amish marriages don't end in divorce. Compare that to the rest of America, where it's close to 50%, and people want to know what's different. What's the secret? Now, most people assume it's because divorce isn't allowed, and they're partly right. Divorce is heavily discouraged in Amish communities, and leaving a marriage means facing serious social and religious consequences. But that's not the whole story. If you think unhappy people are just stuck together out of fear, you're missing something important. I grew up seeing Amish marriages up close. My parents, my aunts and uncles, my older siblings who got married before I left. And what I saw wasn't just people enduring each other. There was something deeper happening. Something about how intimacy works in an Amish marriage that's completely different from what most modern couples experience. So I'm going to tell you what that is. And I'm going to be honest about the good parts and the hard parts, because this isn't a fairy tale. But it is real, and it's something most people on the outside never get explained. Let's start with what intimacy even means in an Amish marriage, because it's not what you think. When most people hear intimacy, they think about physical closeness or emotional conversations. And yes, those things exist in Amish marriages. But the foundation of intimacy in an Amish marriage is something much bigger. It's shared purpose. It's working together toward the same goals every single day. It's knowing that you and your spouse are building a life together that's bigger than just the two of you. Amish couples don't date for years, trying to figure out if they're compatible. They don't live together before marriage to test things out. Courtship is private, and it's relatively short. You meet someone, you spend time together in the context of community events and family gatherings, and if it feels right, you move toward marriage. The assumption from the very beginning is that marriage is permanent. It's not something you try out. It's something you commit to, and then you build your life around that commitment. So when an Amish couple gets married, they're not just promising to love each other. They're promising to work together. And that work starts immediately. If you're a young Amish couple, you're probably living on family land, or you're setting up a home close to family. You're farming together, or you're running a business together, or you're raising children together. Your daily life is intertwined in a way that makes it almost impossible to live separate emotional lives. I watched this with my parents. My father worked the farm, and my mother managed the house, the garden, the children, the meals, the preserving, everything. But it wasn't like he went off to work and she stayed home and they barely saw each other. They were constantly coordinating. He needed to know when meals were ready so he could plan his work. She needed to know what was happening with the animals and the crops so she could plan the food. If something broke, they figured it out together. If money was tight, they made decisions together. If a child was struggling, they talked about it and decided what to do. Their lives weren't just connected, they were woven together. And that kind of daily partnership creates a specific kind of intimacy. You learn to depend on each other. You learn to communicate in ways that go beyond words. My mother could tell what kind of day my father had just by the way he walked into the house. He could tell if she was overwhelmed just by how the kitchen looked. They didn't need long emotional conversations about feelings because they were reading each other all day long. Now here's the part people on the outside struggle to understand. Amish marriages aren't built on romance the way modern marriages are. There's affection, yes. There's love, yes. But it's not the kind of love that depends on constant emotional highs or feeling butterflies every time you see your spouse. It's a steady, practical love that grows over time because you're building something together. You're raising children together. You're surviving hard seasons together. You're depending on each other in ways that create deep trust. And that trust is part of the intimacy secret. When you know your spouse isn't going to leave, when you know that no matter how hard things get, you're both committed to figuring it out, you stop holding back. You stop protecting yourself emotionally in the way people do when they're worried the relationship might end. You let yourself be fully known because you're not afraid of being abandoned. I saw this in my aunt and uncle. They went through a season where money was really tight and they were stressed all the time. They argued more than usual. There was tension, but neither of them ever talked about leaving. It wasn't even an option. So instead of pulling away from each other, they had to push through. They had to keep communicating, keep working together, keep showing up. And on the other side of that hard season, they were closer than before. That's how Amish marriages tend to work. The hard times don't pull you apart because leaving isn't on the table. The hard times force you to go deeper. Now let's talk about physical intimacy, because that's part of this too, and people are curious. Amish culture is modest. We don't talk openly about physical relationships. But that doesn't mean physical intimacy isn't valued. It's just private. What I can tell you from growing up in that culture is that physical intimacy is understood as something that belongs within marriage, and it's meant to be a regular part of a healthy marriage. It's not treated as optional or as something you negotiate, it's expected. And here's something interesting. Because Amish couples aren't consuming the kind of media that creates unrealistic expectations about what physical intimacy should look like, they're not comparing their marriage to some fantasy version. They're just focused on each other. There's less pressure, less performance anxiety, less comparison. Physical intimacy becomes another way of maintaining closeness, not something that has to be perfect or exciting all the time. But intimacy in an Amish marriage isn't just about the couple. It's also about how the couple fits into the larger community and family structure. Amish couples aren't isolated. They're surrounded by extended family. Grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, everyone is involved in each other's lives. And that actually supports the marriage. If you're struggling, there are older couples who've been through it who can give advice. If you need help with the kids or the farm, family shows up. You're not trying to do everything alone, which is what so many modern couples struggle with. But that same community also creates accountability. If your marriage is in trouble, people notice. The church leaders will get involved. Your parents will get involved. You can't just quietly drift apart or have an affair without the whole community knowing. There's pressure to work things out. And while that can feel suffocating, it also means you have support in keeping your marriage together. Now I need to be honest about the harder side of this, because it's not all positive. The reason Amish marriages stay together isn't just because of beautiful intimacy and partnership. It's also because leaving is incredibly difficult. If you're an Amish woman and your marriage is unhappy, your options are extremely limited. Divorce means you'll likely lose your children, your community, your family, everything. Even if you're in a situation where there's mistreatment or serious problems, the expectation is that you work through it, you pray about it, you submit to church counsel. Leaving is seen as a failure of faith. I knew women who were in marriages that weren't happy. Maybe their husband was cold or controlling. Maybe there was a lack of emotional connection. But they stayed, not because they wanted to, but because the cost of leaving was too high. And over time, some of those women found a way to make peace with it. They focused on their children, their work, their faith. They built a life that was meaningful even if the marriage itself wasn't deeply fulfilling. Other women struggled quietly for decades. So when we talk about why Amish marriages stay together, we have to be honest. Some of them stay together because they're genuinely strong and built on deep partnership and intimacy, and some of them stay together because there's no other option. Both things are true. But here's what I think is the real intimacy secret, the thing that actually makes many Amish marriages work better than modern marriages. Amish couples expect marriage to be work. They don't go into it thinking it's supposed to be easy or that love is supposed to carry them through everything. They know from the beginning that there will be hard seasons, that they'll have to choose each other over and over, that they'll have to forgive and be patient and keep showing up even when it's not fun. And because they expect that, they don't panic when things get hard. They don't assume the marriage is broken just because they're going through a rough patch. They don't start wondering if they married the wrong person. They just keep working. They keep building. They keep investing in the partnership. And that commitment, that refusal to give up, creates a kind of intimacy that's rare in the modern world. Modern couples are told that marriage should make them happy, that if they're not happy, they should leave, that there's always someone better out there. So at the first sign of trouble, people start questioning everything. Amish couples don't have that luxury, and honestly, I think that's partly why their marriages last. They can't afford to entertain doubts. They have to push through. And in pushing through, they often find something deeper than happiness. They find partnership. They find trust. They find a love that's not based on feelings, but on years of choosing each other. I left the Amish community, and part of why I left is because I wanted more freedom to choose my own life. I didn't want my marriage options limited to a small group of men in my church district. I didn't want to feel trapped if things went wrong. But even now, years later, I look back at Amish marriages and I see something valuable that's been lost in the modern world. I see couples who know how to work together, who know how to depend on each other, who've built a life that's bigger than their individual desires. So if you're asking why 96% of Amish marriages stay together, the answer isn't simple. It's partly because divorce isn't allowed. It's partly because the social cost of leaving is too high. But it's also because Amish marriages are built on a completely different foundation than modern marriages. They're built on shared work, shared faith, shared community, and a commitment that doesn't waver when things get hard. That creates intimacy, not the butterflies and romance kind of intimacy, but the deep, steady, unshakable kind that comes from truly knowing another person and choosing them every single day for decades. And maybe that's the secret, not that Amish marriages are perfect, but that they're built to last even when they're not perfect. And in a world where half of marriages fall apart, that's something worth paying attention to.